How's it going, guys? How's it going, guys? So today, Ruby Franke had a court hearing, and she pled guilty to 4 counts, and then they dropped, I want to say it was 3 or 4 counts. So she had, she pled guilty to 4 counts of child abuse, and she also had to, in her plea agreement, she had to agree to testify against Jody Hildebrandt. So in her plea agreement, it has all these stipulations for her that I'm going to show you after I show you the court hearing. But while you watch it, you can kind of see when she's talking to the judge where everything is kind of sinking in, and she's kind of like, you can, if you watch her facial expressions, you can see that she's really like sinking in that she actually did these kind of things. So just pay attention to that, and then we'll go over the plea agreement.
Ms. Franke is now here. Mr. Winward, we are scheduled for a waiver hearing. Is there going to be a waiver today?
There will, plus a plea agreement, Your Honor.
All right.
I'll ask the bailiff to hand you if it's been executed.
All right. Mr. Winward, you have discussed with Ms. Franke a preliminary hearing, what's involved in a preliminary hearing. She understands she has a right to a preliminary hearing on all of the charges in the case. She understands what the charges are, and she's prepared to waive a preliminary hearing in the case on all charges.
She is, and that is contained in this agreement on page 7 as well.
Very good. All right, I've been handed a plea agreement, and it appears to be signed by Ms. Franke. Ms. Franke, did you sign this agreement?
Yes.
And you did that today? When did you sign it?
On the 18th.
Okay. You've read it carefully?
Every word.
Your signature represents to the court that you've read it carefully, that you understand what you've read, and that you agree to all of the terms. Is that all accurate?
Yes.
You've had sufficient time to ask questions of your counsel, to go over any questions you have. You're ready to go forward.
Yes.
You don't need any more time.
I'm ready.
Ms. Franke, is anyone pressuring you to enter into this agreement?
No.
Anyone promising you anything I haven't been told about?
No.
Anything that's not in the written plea agreement?
No.
Are you?
See, you can tell she's like super nervous. You can tell she's very uncomfortable, but it's also like, I think she's starting to feel, I feel like she's starting to feel what the things that she did are really starting to like go through her. She's kind of collecting all her thoughts in this process also.
Are you under the influence of alcohol or drugs today?
No.
Is there anything today that could in any way interfere with your ability to understand the agreement, its consequences, anything?
No.
No physical condition, no medication, nothing?
No.
Any further record, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Winward, we ready to proceed?
We are ready to proceed.
All right, then. Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
There is a factual basis set forth in the agreement that is a stipulated factual basis, counsel?
That's correct, Your Honor. That is correct, Judge Walton.
The court finds that the factual basis is sufficient. All of the terms of the agreement are stipulated, including that the court obtain a pre-sentence investigation report, correct?
Correct.
There won't be any argument about whether prison is the appropriate sentence, and there's an agreement about the 4 counts running consecutive.
That is correct.
All right. The court finds then that Ms. Franke's pleas are made knowingly and voluntarily. The court therefore accepts and enters those pleas. The court orders the preparation of a pre-sentence investigation report to be prepared by AP&P and the Department of Corrections. Counsel, what about sentencing on February 20th? I think, do you and your client agree to waive time, counsel?
We do agree to waive time, Your Honor.
February 20th, I believe, is a Tuesday. Is that right? – 10 a.m.?
That works for us, Your Honor.
All right. Anything else for today?
Your Honor, maybe, I've heard the court say this several times in a different fashion. We are not binding the court to any specific sentence, and the court retains its right to sentence as it sees fit. I just mentioned that this is not a Rule 11 plea, but although it's a stipulated statement of defendant.
Counsel, approach, please.
So I think right here, basically, they're trying to say that they're asking the judge to give the sentence that he sees fit instead of what the up to amount is. So I think that's what they're going over right now. But this is the end of this, and then I'm gonna go into the plea agreement.
All right. Anything else for today?
And she has to do something as well. Take a look on the screen. This is significant. The defendant agrees to testify truthfully against Jody Hildebrand. Boom. That's what she needs to do. She needs to provide testimony against Jody Hildebrand. So those two, no longer podcast partners, no longer with anything in common in terms of what they are going to end up trying to do here. Ruby Franke is pointing the finger at her. She was the bad influence on me. The problem is she's the mother. That's going to be the problem. But this is significant for prosecutors because I think it's a little more difficult to prosecute someone else for the abuse of someone else's children, right? Jody Hildebrand's not the mother, but it was her house. Now, what we also learned today, and they didn't say this stuff out loud. In some courtrooms, when you enter your guilty plea, you will say out loud exactly what you did. Instead, she signed a document that outlined what she did. We have that document. Take a listen.
Initially, RF was forced to do physical tasks for hours and days at a time. These included wall sits, carrying boxes full of books up and down stairs, and working outside. Eventually, RF was forced to do outside labor without shoes in the summer heat. He was forced to stand in direct sunlight for several days. He was forced to remain outside at all hours of the day and night for extended periods of time. These actions resulted in repeated and serious sunburns with blistered and sloughing skin. RF was denied adequate water for several days, and he was punished when he secretly consumed water. He was denied sufficient food, and when given food, he was given very plain meals while others in the house ate regular, more flavorful meals. After RF attempted to run away in July, his hands and feet were regularly bound. Binding included being tied to the defendant and to weights. Many times, the binding included using 2 sets of handcuffs, one on RF's wrists and one on his ankles. At times, with RF lying on his stomach, ropes were used to tie the 2 sets of handcuffs together so that his arms and lower legs were lifted off the ground. Abuse committed by the defendant included kicking RF while wearing boots, holding his head underwater, and cutting off oxygen by placing her hands over his mouth and nose. The defendant and another adult regularly sought to indoctrinate RF and convince him he was evil and possessed, and that he needed to willingly be obedient to avoid punishments, and that the punishments were necessary to repent. He was also told everything that was being done to him were acts of love. Other than binding in the specific instances of abuse RF was subjected to, EF was subjected to the same treatment as her brother. She was isolated and forced to do physical tasks, remain outside, and denied food and water. She was also repeatedly told she was evil and possessed. The punishments were necessary for her to be obedient and to repent, and these things were being done to her in order to help her. She was forced to work outside in the heat barefoot. She was also forced to run barefoot on dirt roads for extended periods of time. EF's feet were repeatedly injured and she was repeatedly sunburned. When examined on August 30th, these wounds were apparent by scabs, blisters, and sloughing skin.
Thank goodness that young child escaped that house and got to the neighbor. If he didn't, we'd be looking at another Shonda Vander Ark case here. Denying food and water, and then cuffing the hands and the feet, and tying them together, lifting them up. What is this? What is this? So she got a deal. It's 1 to 15 years per count, consecutive, which is good. She's going to do time. She has to do time. How much is going to be the issue here? But thank goodness that child escaped. Let me bring in our guest. Joining me in Salt Lake.
Could you imagine your child, or hearing that your child was having to go work in the blistering heat and then ending up with blisters on their feet? Like, just so terrible. And the fact that she's blaming it on a whole nother person when these were your kids and you were the one that was okaying it to happen. I just think that's crazy. But she won't be sentenced until February, so it's going to be a little while before she actually gets her her final sentencing and whatnot. But don't forget to like and subscribe.